Mr. Grant, please begin with an overview of your agenda for this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, and belated happy Thanksgiving and happy beginning of the happy holiday season to everybody. This evening, we have three agenda items. Agenda item number one will be having a review of the 2018 financial report and variance explanations. It's just informational. Agenda item two, we will be looking for board consensus to move forward with a district-wide school portrait and yearbook services. Agenda item three, policies 2046 and 808 went through the first reading on November 3rd. Tonight we open up the floor to board and public discussion. First agenda item tonight. Originally we had the auditor, our CPA from Baker Tilly, was scheduled to appear and talk before we went into a variance analysis tonight with an overview of the financial statement from the auditor's perspective. Due to a number of conflicts within their schedule, they were not able to attend tonight. However, they will the partner will be coming down on December 4th, and during the work session, the auditor will give a presentation of the financial statements, review of their opinion and of how the statement of net position works. And then we will put the financial statement through Finance and Budget for approval that evening. This evening, Dr. McGarry and myself will walk through some of the analysis that was created to provide explanation to the differences between our budget and actual numbers for the 2018 year.
Good evening. Thank you, Pat, and members of the board. I guess I'll start off with the first slide. Slide this forward. We'd like to give some preliminary information looking back at the history of the school district financially as it relates to our fund balance, the use of our fund balance, and staffing, and the impact staffing has on our fund balance and our taxes, our ability to tax the public. A couple of key components that we'd like to talk about and make sure that you're aware of as we go through this presentation. Number one, we're asked to pass a budget by June 30th of each school year. Oftentimes, we do not know what the state budget would be, what the federal dollars would be coming to the school district, nor do we understand or do we know at that time the volume and the amount of staff turnover. Earlier this year, we've given some presentations trying to make sure the public and the board are aware of the teacher shortage, especially in particular areas, math, science, special education. There are areas where we're seeing fewer and fewer teachers coming out qualified in those areas. Special education in and of itself, the stress related to that job and the workload of that job, when people do get into that area, they often try to transition out of it, and fewer people are coming out taking on that responsibility. Up here on the slide, I've asked Mr. Grant and his team, and they've done an excellent job. Pat and Craig Rogers do a great job, to give a little summary, a little history of where we are as far as our staffing is concerned. Earlier this year, I asked Dr. Council to give an update on staffing and trends on a national and local level. Here, going left to right, since 2012, you'll see going left to right the number of staff who have left the district. And that in our budget relates to the areas of account 100 and 200, salaries and benefits. We're here on this slide in particular paying attention to just teachers. You'll notice in 2012 it was 53, 2013 47, onwards and upwards to 2018, 79.5. And then we're looking at this year, at the point of this presentation, 66. It's even over that number, closer to probably 70, 80 staff turnover at this point in time. Also, if you look going left to right, master's degree, master's plus, bachelor degree, notice a similar trend, that the school district is investing dollars into training individuals, allowing them and reimbursing them for their master's degree. And at that point in time, there's a trend where more teachers are either leaving the profession, which is a national trend, or they transition to another school environment. Why that dollar amount? Why that year? Usually within the first 5 years of being a teacher, you earn your master's degree. Most school districts would cap that 5 year of service as the most money they would give to match you transitioning into their school district. So if we're year one salary, our tendency is somebody who comes in the Upper Darby School District, we start you in the first year. If you've had 6 or 7 years, we might not give you 6 or 7 years because we couldn't afford to give you 6 or 7 years. The trend in other school districts was also the most we would look at giving you if you had 10 years of service would be 5 years of service, and we'll start you on our step 5. That trend has changed in the last year or so, where school districts are offering many, many years of service to attract candidates to come to their school district in the areas of special education, math, and science, because there are fewer and fewer candidates. In particular, in special education, we've lost several high school teachers who will go to a salary increase somewhere else and less of a workload somewhere else. And they're being compensated sometimes as much as $10,000 more in their salary compared to their salary here in the district. So school districts are giving years of service more than they have in the past. I share this with you because as we go through these presentations, also note that this is just the salaries and the benefits. This does not take into account each year that the board has reimbursed staff for continuing their education, as well as the professional development we've provided staff, the cost there. That's additional costs that are not accounted for in this presentation. So what does this mean? In the light blue, going left to right, it's roughly $3.3 million that we budgeted to have that staff here. But for this current year, in 2019, we know that we are not spending $3.3 million in our personnel budget because of the loss of teachers.
That's on salaries alone.
That's on salaries alone. Okay, in the orange and the peach, I guess the colors depending on how you see them, you'll see from 2012 to 2018, it's a little under 60 teachers, the turnover. From 2012 to 2017, it's 45. You'll see a trend where it's picking up a little bit. And then in 2018, it's almost 80 teachers, turnover of almost 80 teachers, in particular certain subject areas. A vast majority of the teachers that we're losing do have a master's degree. Any questions about this slide? Okay. What does this mean? Why are we sharing this with you? Because each year you're asked to pass a budget, and these are unanticipated items that come up after you've closed your budget, meaning we have staff who leave July, August, September. When you budget for the $3.3 million in that area of staffing, we are often tasked in our school district of bringing in teachers at a first or second year without their master's degree. What does that mean? That means when staff that are more educated, that we provided more professional development leave, we're bringing in a lower salaried employee. What's the negative there from a curriculum instruction former guy? You want to keep staff that you've invested in. And that's a consideration as we continue to work on our contract. We want to support teachers and encourage them to stay in our district and appropriately compensate them to stay in our school district. That's number one. Number two, the business office might say, as we go through this slide, that turnover, however, has allowed us to survive as a school district financially in some ways. If we go from the top of this, the first are the 100s and 200s, that's salaries and benefits. As you work through the other accounting areas, 300 all the way through 900, we've also put in new mechanisms in the business office and under Christine Kelly, our director of curriculum, how we purchase books, professional development, oversight in those areas with Craig Rogers and Pat and Christine, a lot more oversight, where you'll see that we're under budget in some areas. We're also over budget in some areas, in particular services and supports for special education. Again, unanticipated costs. Why does the salary and benefits, the 100s and 200s matter? Because as we have high turnover with years of experience, we're bringing in teachers with less experience at a lower dollar amount, and that offsets the other costs. If we had to budget the $3.3 million like we did, and that staff stayed, we'd be looking at close to $1.8 million in being over budget.
Yes. We were about 1.5 million.
Yeah, 1.5 million over budget. So instead, we're under budget because of the turnover in the staff, which allows us to offset costs in the other areas that are over budget. Any questions about that so far? It's a pro and a con, depending on what office you work in. I also think it's a con with respect to the impact it has on student achievement, climate, and culture as well. I think it's a big impact. Gina?
Good evening. I'm not sure if you said this, if I missed it, but are the retirees included?
No.
Okay,
No, the dollar amount would change with the retirees if they were.
with the
included.
retirees?
Yep.
Okay, but that's not necessarily anticipated every year. You know, some people decide that they're going to retire maybe in the middle of the summer or,
I think we have a better handle on the retirement in the sense that there's a specific March date where a letter is turned in, and we have a contractual relationship there where, yes, there are certainly things that come up in the summer where unanticipated situations. By and large, though, we have a better understanding of retirements prior to the passing of a budget. In fact, when we build our budget, Ms. Curry, we use that anticipated transition with retirements to balance our budget as we do budget each year. We'll talk about it again this year. That's about March when we get the retirements, and we'll say whether we hit the threshold or not.
Just a quick question on the previous slide. There was a spike in 2018, and you said, and what do you attribute that to? Just the trend changing as far as school districts giving teachers more for their years of service rather than not giving them, matching the years of service that they really have?
I think there's three contributing factors in the research and the studies and what we know we're facing. Compensation is definitely a part of it. There's no question about it. Climate and culture is definitely a part of it. Working in poverty, working in certain conditions is taxing to individuals. I think the third part is definitely the fact that other school districts, there's a less graduated people coming out of higher education wanting to become teachers. So that makes it less candidates that are out there and more competition, and school districts are paying more than they normally would for years of service. So those three, I think, are contributing factors. And I think all three of those are true in our situation.
Yeah, a question on the next slide. When you were saying basically we're losing experienced teachers and bringing in teachers with relatively less experience, by any chance is the amount we're spending in other purchase services essentially, if our more experienced teachers stayed, would that reduce our other purchase services? Are we purchasing services in part because we're replacing experienced teachers with less experienced teachers?
Can I give you my opinion on that? I don't have any facts to that
Okay.
yet. I would definitely say that experienced teachers that are here, know the systems, know our resources, I think that, on the other hand, could be a cost savings mechanism. It creates a better climate, it creates a culture, there's a relationship there. I think there's a positive there. Yeah, you don't want to see such high teacher turnover, to your point. Can I prove that right now? No.
Okay.
But I do think that it does mitigate that. The other part of that is one day I'd like to give a presentation. I also think having resources early enough in our elementary schools is also a contributing factor. But I definitely think the turnover as far as learning the curriculum, especially in special education, it's a lot. It's a taxing, the paperwork and the workload for a special education teacher, it's a lot of responsibility, a lot of stress. So I think all of those resources do have an impact on it. I can't prove it to you right now, but I would say you being in education, I think it does. I think it does.
Thank you.
I definitely think it has an impact on student achievement.
I have
Yep.
one more, and again, this can be your opinion. Are we in like a catch-22 with, so experienced teachers leave, we hire newer teachers, they, in their first 5 years, get their masters, and then they leave, and then we get more experience, and then they also get their masters. And we're not quite getting that plateau of where that's not a cost, right? But we're getting the benefit. I don't know if.
Yep, I understand what you're saying.
Right? If you just want to speak to that, or if you have any kind of ballpark.
Yeah,
or
I
just-
think we have negotiated in our contracts the relationship of paying for an education and giving something back. But you're right, there's a plateau that you also benefit from investing in your employees early enough that you don't have to continue to spend that same dollar amount and you're getting back what you put into them. That's the relationships that's there. But you can't fault an educator who, if they can get a job in a different environment, making, you know, $5, $6, sometimes $10,000 more a year and reach the top of your pay scale sooner than you do in other places. You know, in this system, it's designed that if you reach your pay scale higher earlier, it's a benefit to you in the retirement system. So, and we can't, in a lot of ways, we haven't been able to compete with that. But you're correct in the idea that after those certain number of years, there is a significant benefit.
I guess I just wanted people to consider
Yep.
that there's a certain payout that we're not getting just as it happens, that's all. So.
Yeah, and I think part of this presentation, that we want to support teachers. We want to support the board and support the community. We also want to explain to you why the budgets come in the way that they do. We're looking at a budget of almost $200 million that we came within almost just under 2% of hitting the mark of that you'll see later. And in fact, we're under budget instead of being over budget by that dollar amount. So that's a pretty impressive along those lines. The problem is you're contributing to a system where there's turnover, and that's not necessarily a savings you want to have, right? So we want to prevent that from happening and invest in that area. To your point, Don, I think we want to look at that point of why is this happening and what's going on. That also taxes our administration too, especially at the high school. Pat, this slide here includes, if you want to jump in, the top part of the slide does include other staffing in the dollar amount of the $4.4 million, not just teacher salaries.
Well, yeah, when we look up here,
Hit your button.
when we look at the top account, 3 lines where we're looking at the personnel cost, I just separated out the teachers only for the sole reason to demonstrate what the effect of almost 80 teachers leaving the district had created in our budget. That alone created we were under budget by almost $2 million alone. So you see the 2018 budget, 2018 actual, and the variances. The impact with the teachers, with resignations within the district, it's going to completely change your demographic pool. Because we're bringing in a younger group of teachers where you may have an older group of teachers who may be more in the lines of having been married or having children at that point in time. When we're bringing in newer staff, a lot of the times what we're seeing is a big shift going into a single pool in medical benefits. So, that creates its own anomaly in itself. PSERS with a rate of 32.57%, that has a major effect on your budget as well.
So on this slide, what you'll see on the second half of the other account areas is while we're under budget in our salaries and benefits, you have facilities issues, facilities needs, you're over budget in other services, other areas, and the district was able to move almost $1 million into its capital improvements, which is really not even putting a dent in what we have to do, but at least you're able to move that money, which you did earlier this year. You approved the resolution to move that money over to offset some of your capital improvement needs, which is one of the areas that we were able to trade off there. So that savings comes and allows you to do that. It's also important to note what we budgeted for salaries, if it didn't change, you would see being over budget in certain areas.
So the summary or the net that I'm supposed to get from this particular slide is the fact that we have this high teacher turnover, almost 80 teachers. We're under budget $4 million as a result of that? Okay.
Correct. This is just another way of looking at the breakdown of the dollar amount dollars that come into the school district from taxing, from transfer taxes, from federal dollars, state dollars, and other local revenue sources. You'll see, once again, the vast majority of the amount of the money comes from taxing people.
It's just a synopsis of a budget to actual on our revenues. As you can see, we were just under 2% off of budget. We exceeded our budget on our revenue expectations. In part, we had in the local revenues, it was mostly in the area of greater transfer taxes, and that resulted from commercial transactions that occurred, and a higher rate of collection in our delinquent taxes. So that contributed to the majority of the $1.9 million that we were over budget. State revenues, we were about 1.6 over budget, and the increase was mostly in subsidized transportation costs. We did not expect to have generated that, because when we look and compare to how prior years' reports were generated, and at that time, we had a different administration and staff in the transportation department. So fortunately, with the way Marco had led the department in the last year, and then actually following the reports, we exceeded the budget dollar amount by several $100,000. Federal revenues, there were several federal grants that were not available to the district at the time at which the budget was created. So what it is, we received these funds, which allowed us to shift costs from the district on the expenditure side and push them into the federal grants to try to create a type of savings.
The local revenues, does that correlate to the tax revenues on the previous chart? It just says tax.
Tax revenues are part of your local revenues, yes.
Okay, thanks.
In the end, the district ended up with revenues exceeding expenditures of $509,000. Our fund balance to start the year with was close to $23.9 million. We now end up with a fund balance at June 30th of $24.4 million. The way, as we explained before in prior meetings, that the fund balance is broken into 4 different component parts. $326,000 of that is considered non-spendable. $6.881 million was committed to support the 2018-19 budget. $5.8 million is an assigned fund balance. Included in that is about $1.8 million in retirement rate stabilization, $1.5 million for other post-retirement benefit liabilities, $1.5 million for emergency capital replacement, another $1 million set aside for educational and technology resources, and we had a reserve for encumbrance of about $3,600. The balance is the unassigned fund balance, and that is $11.4 million, or which represents 5.418% of our $210 million current budget. Now, under the guidelines prescribed by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, we're only going to have a maximum of 8% in our unassigned fund balance.
So on this slide that you have, while we went through this presentation tonight, and Pat added some more information on the end that he can provide you those details. We would provide that as we go through the preliminary budget and the process we're going to go through. What we wanted to show you tonight is simply staff turnover in the 100s and 200s, right, contributed to us to allowing us to balance our budget in the other areas that may have been over, which then states in the third to last line that we actually put in back into our fund balance $509,000, right? So revenues exceeding expenditures. Essentially, we're under budget for that year that we brought in. We could put that money back into the fund balance. So our fund balance is actually higher at this point than it was anticipated to be going into that budget season. That's the important part that we wanted you to understand of this presentation. We'll go through all the other details and all the other dollar amounts of the assigned and unassigned as we go through this budget process again this year. But it's important for you to understand that staff turnover after a budget is passed contributes to the money going back into a fund balance. On one hand, it's a negative for curriculum instruction and achievement and climate and culture. On the other hand, it's allowing you to balance your budget.
Any questions from the board? Any comments or questions? Okay, Mr. Grant, before we go on to, thank you very much. Appreciate it. It was very informative. Before we go on to agenda item 2, I want to make sure I cover attendance. I skipped over that. I marked everyone present with the exception of Dr. Rucci and Ms. Mitchell, who's not here. They're both excused. Thank you. You can move on to Agenda item 2.
Good evening. Our agenda item 2 will be Mr. McGilvery's here to discuss our district-wide school portrait and yearbook services.
Good evening, everyone. Very, very briefly, tonight we are seeking the board's approval to solicit proposals from interested companies for senior portraits, school photography, which includes ID badges, as well for yearbook publication. Currently, we have 3 different companies providing these services, and by combining them all to one vendor, we'd be able to lower the cost for families, provide equal services across all schools, all while being more convenient and more efficient. It's our intent to make a recommendation to the board at the January board meeting. Any questions?
How about class rings? Has that ever been looked at? Because the cost of them is just so expensive now for our students.
Right. No, I've never in my time looked into a
That might be
The
something
program where we could-
Yeah, moving
Yeah.
forward, because they really have kind of outpriced, seniors.
Right, again, there's no district expense for rings, obviously. It's going to be the student that pays that, so we would certainly frame that similar to what we do with the yearbook, which is, again, paid by the students.
It's all tied in. Okay.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, thank you, Mr. McGilvery.
Policy 246 and Policy 808 went through the first reading on November 3rd, and we open the floor to board discussion and/or public comment.
I do want to make a note that we did some homework and we checked into Policy 246. You'll note from the first reading some minor changes related to shared snacks. We also want to state that we're going to look into a development of an AR that the snacks that are shared are healthy, and that we are very much in support of students being celebrated on their birthdays. So you'll see that that is still part of the policy as well. But they are some changes from the first reading that we think are positive changes. Just want to make note of that here tonight.
I was looking at the school wellness policy, and I noticed that the non-sold competitive foods was the primary addition to the document. Can you talk about that a little bit?
That's really one of the big changes that are in there. So that's wording that the state is making us put in there about the non-sold competitive foods. But the important thing was that we can do that based on the district guidelines. So we don't have to just say blanket not having any shared snacks and not having any competitive foods and not having cupcakes. So that was the important piece. We have the flavor of the law in there, but it allows us to have some flexibility for what the district wants.
So if I could just add compliments to Wendy and to the team, and the food service audit that just took place was very successful, very clean audit. One of the points that they brought up is this idea of shared snacks and foods, and that's why those conversations were had, and we sought further clarity. But Wendy deserves a lot of credit for the audit that took place, did a great job with that.
I mean, I think it's something that we can continue to look at year after year, as Dr. McGarry said, to encourage parents to bring in healthy snacks, I think is something that is a way to do that, and maybe just have a balance between, what we serve at a party. Many districts have gotten away from it altogether for various reasons, allergies and things like that, and I don't think we're there yet. But continue to look at it every year. We do have a wellness committee that meets, 3 or 4 times a year, and we'll continue to get feedback on that.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question, Ms. Elgart. When it comes to the fundraising activities, can you explain that a little further about what that means as far as the fundraising and the smart snacks?
I used to have to approve that, and then it went through Chris's office as far as,
Yeah.
so one example would be, you could sell pretzels, but if you're eating the pretzels during the day, you can't sell them and eat an unhealthy snack during the day. So there's a process and procedure that any fundraising that takes place can't be in the event of eating unhealthy foods during the school day by spending that money on those products as a fundraiser. You can sell it after school at a certain time, but you can't sell Snickers bars during the day and eat them as a fundraiser. Like years ago, you could bring in big, large Snickers bars or anything else and sell them, and you can eat them during the day. You can't do that any longer because it's an unhealthy food. You can sell it at a certain time after school, as long as you're not eating it during the school day. So we have an AR and a procedure to make sure that we're following that process.
Any other questions or comments regarding policy 246? All All right, policy 808.
Oh, I'm sorry. Policy 808 is really the changes that came about when we went to CEP. So we no longer, the language that was in there is that we would contact parents every time a student had a balance and they owed money, but we would continue to feed students. Now we feed all students breakfast and lunch, and no student can have a balance, because if they want to buy a snack, they would have to have the money on their account or with them to buy the snack, or we just don't sell the snack. So therefore, no parent ever owes money. So we just took out all of that wording and made it much simpler.
Thank you very much for updating the policy. Any questions regarding policy 808? No comments from the board? Okay. No public comment? No? All right, all right. So let's move on. Mr. Grant, will you review the agenda items presented this evening?
All right, Mr. Brown. Agenda item 1 was just informational. Agenda item 2, we're looking for board consensus to go to RFP for our district-wide school portrait and yearbook services.
Do we have consensus from the board? Yes.
Okay. Looking for policy 246, 808, we're looking for board consensus to move to a second reading at the December 4th board meeting.
We okay moving those forward? Yes, yes. All right. I think that's it. A motion is in order for adjournment of the Finance and Operations Committee meeting.
So moved.
We're adjourned. We'll start the pupil services meeting in about 5 minutes.